A hotel housekeeper making $12 an hour fed a homeless man every morning before work. 7 months later, the Pentagon knocked on her door. Because the man she thought was just a stranger had built the satellite systems protecting the entire country. 3 people in dark suits stood in the hallway of a condemned apartment building in Detroit at 6:15 in the morning. One of them held a manila folder stamped with a Department of Defense seal. Another adjusted his tie, visibly uncomfortable with the smell of mildew seeping through the walls. The third, a woman actually, not a man, stood slightly ahead of the other 2. Her name badge read Deputy Director, Office of Personnel Accountability. She knocked again, harder this time. On the other side of the door, Mariana Reyes was sitting on the edge of her mattress lacing up her work shoes, the white sneakers she wore to both jobs, because she could not afford 2 pairs. She had been awake since 4:30. Her uniform from the Grandview Hotel was already on, pressed with a flat iron because she did not own an ironing board. The knock made her freeze. Nobody knocked on her door. Not at this hour. Not ever, really. She crossed the tiny apartment in 6 steps and opened the door with the chain still on. 3 strangers. Government IDs held up like shields. Miss Reyes, the woman said, "We are here regarding Harold Birch." Mariana's breath caught. Harold, the old man from the bench. Her fingers tightened on the door frame. "What happened to him?" she whispered. "Is he gone?" The woman's expression softened by exactly 1 degree. "May we come inside? There is quite a lot you need to know. If you are new to this channel, and you love stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, take a moment right now to subscribe. You will not want to miss where this one goes." 7 months earlier, Mariana had not known Harold Birch existed. She knew the bench, though. Everyone in that part of Southwest Detroit knew the bench. It sat outside a shuttered auto parts warehouse on Verner Highway, bolted to a concrete pad that had cracked down the middle years ago. The city had forgotten to remove it when the warehouse closed. Now it just sat there, rusted and leaning slightly to the left, like everything else on that block. Mariana walked past it every morning at 5:50 on her way to catch the 6:10 bus to the Grandview Hotel downtown. For 3 weeks in early January, she noticed someone sleeping on it. An older white man, tall but folded in on himself, a green army surplus jacket pulled tight around his shoulders, a garbage bag of belongings wedged under the bench like an anchor. His face was weathered and angular, cheekbones sharp enough to cast shadows even in the weak winter light. His hair was white and cut short, almost military, though she had not made that connection yet. Most mornings she walked past without stopping. She told herself what everyone tells themselves. She did not have enough to share. That was not a lie. Mariana worked 2 jobs and still could not keep the lights on consistently. Housekeeper at the Grandview from 7 to 3, then shelf stocker at a Dollar Depot on Michigan Avenue from 5 to 11. 6 days a week. Her 1 day off she spent at the laundromat and the free clinic if she needed it. Rent on her studio was $580 a month. She was perpetually 1 paycheck behind. But one morning in late January, the temperature dropped to 9 degrees. Mariana left her building bundled in every layer she owned and saw the old man on the bench, motionless, frost forming on the collar of his jacket. She stopped, stared, felt her stomach twist. She had a thermos of chicken broth in her bag that she had made the night before from bouillon cubes and whatever vegetables were about to go bad in her refrigerator. It was supposed to be her lunch. She walked over and stood in front of him until he opened his eyes. They were pale blue, startlingly clear, the kind of eyes that looked like they had seen things most people only read about. He studied her face the way you study a map when you are lost. Not with suspicion, with careful attention. "I made too much soup," Mariana said, holding out the thermos. "You want some?" The old man looked at the thermos, then back at her. His jaw worked like he was chewing on words he could not quite form. "You should keep that," he said. His voice was rough but precise, each word chosen like it cost something. "Winter is not done with you yet." Mariana almost laughed. "Maybe not," she said, "but I am offering." He took the thermos with both hands, held it against his chest like a living thing. "Thank you. Harold. Harold Birch." "Mariana." She paused, not sure why she was giving her name to a stranger on a frozen bench at 5:50 in the morning. "Mariana Reyes." She nearly walked away. nearly folded that moment into the long list of small encounters that never become anything. But Harold unscrewed the thermos cap, took a sip of the broth, and closed his eyes. The expression on his face was not gratitude. It was something deeper than that. Recognition. Like he had forgotten that warmth existed and was remembering it for the first time in years. Mariana stood there a moment longer than she needed to. Then she asked the question that changed everything. "Do you like your soup with crackers or without?" Harold smiled. It was a careful smile, practiced, like he had not used it in a long time and was testing whether it still worked. "Crackers if you have got them." The next morning she brought soup and a sleeve of saltines from the Dollar Depot. She had slipped them into her bag at the end of her shift, not stolen exactly, but taken from a damaged box that was headed for the dumpster. The morning after that, soup and an orange. By the end of the first week, she had a routine. 5:30, heat the soup. 5:40, pack the thermos and whatever else she could scrape together. 5:50, walk to the bench. Sit with Harold for 10 or 15 minutes before the bus came. They talked. Or rather, Harold talked and Mariana listened. He told her about his life, or what she assumed were fragments of a life reassembled by a mind that might not be working right anymore. He spoke about laboratories underground, places where you needed 3 different badges just to reach the elevator. He described machines that could see through weather systems, satellites that could read a license plate from orbit. He mentioned names she did not recognize, generals and directors and project titles that sounded like they came from a science fiction novel. "I helped build the eyes of this country," Harold said one morning, staring at the traffic on Werner Highway with those pale blue eyes. And then the eyes forgot who made them. Mariana nodded and handed him a sleeve of crackers. She assumed he was confused. Maybe early dementia. Maybe just decades of untreated mental illness expressing itself as grandiose memories. She did not challenge him. She just listened, because listening cost nothing, and Harold seemed like a man who had not been listened to in a very long time. Some mornings Harold was sharp and focused, his sentences crisp, his observations almost uncomfortably precise. He would comment on the way Mariana carried herself, the slight hitch in her walk when her feet hurt from standing all day, the way she always looked left before she looked right when she crossed the street. "You walk like someone who grew up watching for trouble," he said one morning in mid-March. Mariana did not answer right away. She had grown up watching for trouble. Her father had left when she was 6. Her mother had worked 3 jobs in a town where the factories had all closed, raising Mariana and her younger brother in a house where the furnace broke every other winter. Her brother was in the army now, stationed somewhere in South Korea. They talked on the phone once a month when their schedules aligned. Her mother had moved to Texas to live with her sister after a knee replacement that she could not afford the physical therapy for. Mariana sent her money when she could, which was almost never. She did not tell Harold any of this. Not at first. But he had a way of creating silence that invited confession, and by the 3rd week of their morning routine, she found herself talking about things she had not said out loud in years. About the nursing program she was barely holding on to. About the nights when she could not sleep because the upstairs neighbor played music until 3 in the morning and the walls were so thin she could hear the bass line in her teeth. About the specific shade of shame she felt when she had to put items back at the grocery store because her card was declined. Harold listened to all of it without pity, without advice, without any of the performative concern she had learned to distrust. He just listened, and when she finished, he would nod once, slowly, and say something that stayed with her for days. "The world counts the wrong things," he told her one morning. "It counts money and titles and square footage. It does not count the things that actually hold everything together." "What things?" Mariana asked. He looked at her with those pale blue eyes. "The things you do every morning before the sun comes up." Other people were not as patient. One morning in late March, a delivery driver pulling up to the warehouse loading dock leaned out of his truck window and shouted at Harold to move his stuff before he called the cops. Harold did not respond, did not even look up. Mariana was 20 feet away, approaching with the thermos. She walked to the truck window. "His name is Harold," she said, her voice flat and hard. "He is not hurting anyone. Lady, he is blocking my dock. He is sitting on a bench. The bench is on public property. Mind your business." Mariana did not move. The driver revved his engine, then backed up and used the other side of the dock. Harold watched the whole exchange in silence. When Mariana sat down beside him, he looked at her for a long time. "You have iron in you," he said quietly. "Good. You are going to need it." She did not understand what he meant. She handed him the thermos and waited for the bus. By April, the routine was the only part of Mariana's day that felt stable. Everything else was fracturing. Her hours at the Grandview had been cut from 40 to 32 because the hotel was losing business. That meant $120 less per paycheck. The Dollar Depot had not given raises in 2 years. She did the math every Tuesday night sitting on her mattress on the floor, the bed frame sold 2 months prior to cover a medical bill from when she had sliced her hand open on a broken shelf bracket at work and needed 7 stitches. Rent, $580. Bus pass, $45. Phone, $38. Electric, past due, $112. Medical debt and collections, $460. Student loan payments deferred for the 3rd time. She was taking 2 classes at Wayne County Community College toward a nursing assistant certificate, paying out of pocket $60 per class when she could, skipping semesters when she could not. Her refrigerator contained a half-empty bottle of hot sauce, some tortillas, a bag of dried beans, and 3 bouillon cubes. That was a Tuesday. She made broth from the bouillon and beans, enough for 2 servings. One for Harold, one for herself, except she did not eat hers. She poured it into the thermos for the next morning, telling herself she would eat at work. The hotel cafeteria sometimes had leftovers the kitchen staff would slide to housekeepers who looked hungry enough. Mariana had learned to look hungry enough without looking desperate. There was a difference, and the difference mattered. At the Grandview, Rosa Gutierrez noticed. Rosa was the head of housekeeping, 57, Dominican, built like a fire hydrant and roughly as immovable. She had worked at the Grandview for 22 years and had trained every housekeeper who had come through those doors. She saw everything. "You are getting thin," Rosa said one afternoon, catching Mariana in the supply closet restocking her cart. "I am fine. That is what skinny girls say before they pass out in a hallway, and I have to fill out an incident report." Rosa reached into her own lunch bag and pulled out a foil-wrapped bundle. "Rice and beans. Eat. I cannot take your lunch." "You can and you will." Rosa pushed the bundle into Mariana's hands. "And stop giving away all your food to that man on the bench." Mariana stiffened. "How do you know about that?" "Honey, I know everything. It is literally my job." Rosa's voice softened. "He is lucky to have you. But you cannot pour from an empty cup." "I am not empty," Mariana said. "You are close. Eat the rice. Tell me tomorrow you ate breakfast." Mariana took the rice. Her throat felt tight in a way that had nothing to do with hunger. She ate it in the bathroom on her break, sitting on the closed lid of a toilet in a hotel that charged $400 a night for rooms she cleaned for $12 an hour. That night she sat in her apartment doing the math again. If she walked to the Grandview instead of taking the bus 3 mornings a week, she could save $9. If she picked up a Saturday shift at the Dollar Depot, another $35. If she stopped buying oranges for Harold and stuck to just soup, she could stretch the bouillon another week. She stared at the column of numbers until they blurred. Her phone buzzed on the mattress. A text from the electric company. Final notice. Service will be disconnected in 10 days without payment of $112. Mariana closed her eyes and pressed her hands flat against the floor. She could stop. She could keep the broth for herself, use the orange money for the electric bill, skip the morning walk, and sleep 30 extra minutes. Harold would understand. He would probably tell her to stop if he knew how bad things were. That was who he was. But the thought of walking past that bench, seeing him there, not stopping, she could not do it. The bench had become the only place in her life where she felt like a whole person instead of a collection of problems. Harold did not see a struggling housekeeper or a bill she could not pay. He saw Mariana. Just Mariana. That was worth more than 30 extra minutes of sleep. On Friday morning, she told herself she would tell Harold this was the last week. She rehearsed the words on her walk to the bench. She would explain about the electric bill, about the cut hours, about the math that did not work no matter how many times she ran it. Harold would nod and tell her she was doing the right thing. She was sure of it. But when she got there, and he split the sleeve of crackers and handed half back to her, Fair is fair, he said simply. Mariana had to turn away so he would not see her face crumpling. She did not say a word about stopping. She caught the bus and went to work, and the next morning she made the soup again, same as always. Then she looked at the pot on the hot plate, already simmering with tomorrow's broth, and she added an extra cube. For Harold. Harold disappeared on a Monday in May. Mariana arrived at the bench at 5:50 with the thermos and a packet of crackers, and found nothing. The bench was empty. The garbage bag was gone. Even the flattened piece of cardboard Harold sometimes sat on had vanished, as though someone had erased every trace of him from that corner of Werner Highway. She waited for 20 minutes, watching the buses come and go, until she could not wait any longer without losing her shift. She left the thermos on the bench with a note tucked under the lid. Hope you are okay. M. She checked every morning that week. Tuesday, nothing. Wednesday, nothing. Thursday, she walked 6 blocks out of her way to the Covenant House shelter on her way home from the Dollar Depot, her feet screaming after 8 hours on concrete. The intake worker barely glanced up. We do not track people unless they check in with us. Can you look? Please. His name is Harold Birch. Typing. Scrolling. Shaking her head. Nothing. Try the VA. Mariana called 4 hospitals that night from her apartment. Not one would release patient information to someone who was not family. She tried the VA hotline and spent 40 minutes on hold before a recorded message told her to call back during business hours. She sat on her mattress and pressed her palms against her eyes until she saw stars. 5 days without Harold felt like a wound she could not explain. He was an old man on a bench. She had known him for 4 months. But he was the only person in her life who asked her how her classes were going, who remembered the name of her anatomy professor, who told her she had iron in her. On the 6th day, she left another thermos on the bench, this time with a longer note. I am not going anywhere. Come back. On the 8th day, he was there, thinner, his cheekbones sharper, the hollows under his eyes deeper, his skin papery and gray. He was sitting upright on the bench, which was unusual. Harold usually leaned back, relaxed, like the bench was a throne he had chosen. Today he sat rigid, like something hurt, and he was trying not to show it. Mariana almost dropped the thermos. Harold. He looked up. The blue eyes were cloudier than before, but they found her face and held it. Miss Mariana, where were you? I looked everywhere. I called hospitals. Had a setback. His voice was weaker, slower. I am better now. You do not look better. I am upright. That counts. He tried to smile. It almost worked. That was when she noticed his wrist. A white hospital bracelet, partially hidden by his jacket sleeve, with a barcode and a string of numbers she could not read. She reached for it. Harold pulled his arm back. Do not worry about that, he said. Just a checkup. Harold. I am fine. Then he reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out an envelope. White. Sealed. An address written on the front in handwriting that trembled at every letter. If something happens to me, Harold said, his voice dropping to something barely above breath, I need you to send this. Mariana stared at the envelope. What do you mean, if something happens? Just promise me. You are scaring me. Mariana, promise me. She took the envelope. It was heavier than paper should be. I promise. He nodded slowly, like a man setting down a weight he had carried for years. Thank you. She wanted to ask 100 questions. Wanted to open the envelope right there. But the bus was coming, and Harold had already closed his eyes, his head tilting back against the rusted bench frame. She slipped the envelope into her bag beside her work shoes and caught the bus. She did not open it. She had promised. 3 weeks later, Harold collapsed. Mariana was handing him the thermos when his whole body seized. Not a tremor. A convulsion, sudden and violent, his hands clawing at the air, the thermos shattering on the concrete. She caught him as he fell sideways off the bench, his full weight crashing into her arms. She lowered him to the ground, shouting for help. A woman across the street stopped and stared. 2 men walking a dog kept walking. A teenager on a bicycle slowed down, then pedaled faster. Call 911, Mariana screamed. The woman across the street finally pulled out her phone. Mariana held Harold's head off the pavement. His breathing was ragged, shallow, each inhale a fight. His lips were turning gray. She pressed her hand to his chest, and felt his heart hammering unevenly, skipping beats, stuttering like an engine running out of fuel. "Stay with me," she said. "Come on, Harold. Stay with me." The ambulance took 11 minutes. Each one felt like a year. When the paramedics arrived, they loaded Harold onto a stretcher with efficient, practiced movements. One of them looked at Mariana. "Are you family?" "I am all he has," she said. She climbed into the ambulance without waiting for permission. At Detroit Mercy Hospital, they wheeled Harold through double doors and left Mariana in a waiting room with green plastic chairs and a television playing a morning talk show on mute. She sat down, realized she was shaking, realized her shift had started 40 minutes ago. She texted Rosa. "Emergency." Harold collapsed. "At the hospital. Cannot come in." Rosa replied in 30 seconds. "Which hospital?" "Detroit Mercy. I will handle your rooms. Keep me posted. And eat something." An hour passed. Then 2. Mariana sat in the plastic chair and stared at the scuffed linoleum floor and counted the tiles. She counted because counting was something she could control, and right now everything else felt like it was spinning beyond her reach. She replayed the moment in her mind, the way Harold's hand had started shaking, the way his eyes had rolled, the sound his body made hitting the concrete bench before she caught him. She kept seeing his lips turning gray. She kept feeling the irregular hammering of his heart under her hand, like a machine breaking down in real time. At one point, a nurse walked through the waiting room, and Mariana stood up so fast the nurse actually stepped back. The nurse was not there for her. She sat down again. Her phone buzzed. A text from the Dollar Depot manager asking if she was coming in for her evening shift. She typed back no, erased it, typed something longer about a family emergency, erased that too, and finally just typed no. Then a woman at the intake desk called her name. Mariana Ruiz. Reyes, Mariana corrected automatically. She walked to the desk. A tired-looking administrator was staring at a screen. "You are here for Harold Birch?" The woman asked. "Yes." "Is he stable?" "He is alive. Dehydration, possible cardiac event, possible stroke. We are running tests." She paused. "But we have a problem. No insurance, no identification, no emergency contact. Hospital policy requires transfer to county overflow." Mariana's chest tightened. County General. She had heard the stories. Patients on gurneys in hallways. 12-hour waits. People who went in sick and came out sicker. "He is a veteran," Mariana said. The words came out before she had fully decided to say them. She was not sure they were true. But Harold's stories, the underground laboratories, the satellites, the badges, something in her gut said they were not invented. The administrator raised an eyebrow. "Do you have documentation?" "He lives on a bench. He does not carry a filing cabinet." "Can you check the VA database?" "I would need authorization. A family connection. I am his niece." The lie came easily, fueled by desperation. The administrator stared at her. Then a voice behind them cut in. "Run the check." Mariana turned. A doctor in a white coat was standing in the doorway. Indian American, late 40s, reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. Her badge read DR. Ananya Kapoor, Emergency Medicine. "Run it as a courtesy," Dr. Kapoor said again. "If there is a match, we keep him here and bill the VA. If not, county. Fair." Mariana nodded. "Fair." The administrator sighed and started typing. 30 seconds of silence. Then the screen beeped. The administrator leaned forward. Her expression changed. "What?" Dr. Kapoor asked, stepping closer. "There is a match. Harold Allen Birch, born 1955, honorable discharge 1999. The administrator scrolled down. Most of the service record is redacted. Almost the entire file is classified. Dr. Kapoor moved behind the desk and read the screen. She was quiet for a long moment. "Move him to the cardiac wing," she said. "I will handle the VA authorization personally." She looked at Mariana. "You can see him in about an hour. He is going to need someone." "I will be here," Mariana said. "Every day?" She waited until they let her in. Harold was awake, barely. Wires and tubes connected him to machines that beeped in soft rhythms. He looked smaller in the hospital bed, diminished, the sharp lines of his face softened by exhaustion and fluorescent light. "Hey," Mariana said, pulling a chair close. His eyes opened. Found her face. "You did not have to stay," he whispered. "Yeah, I did. He reached for her hand. His grip was weak, but his fingers were steady. "You have iron," he murmured. "Good." She stayed until the nurses made her leave. Stayed through the shift she was supposed to work at the Dollar Depot. Stayed until the hallway was dark and quiet, and someone gently told her visiting hours had ended. Walking out through the lobby, she passed a vending machine and realized she had not eaten in 20 hours. She bought a bag of peanuts with her last $1.75 and ate them on the bus ride home. She thought about the administrator's face when the screen showed Harold's file. All those redacted lines. All that classified history. She thought about the envelope in her bag. And for the first time, she considered the possibility that Harold Birch was not confused at all. If this story has you hooked, type, "I'm still here" in the comments. Let me know you are with me, because this story is far from over. Harold was transferred to a VA long-term care facility in Dearborn 2 weeks later. It was across the city, 2 buses and a 20-minute walk from Mariana's apartment. She went 3 times a week when she could manage it, rearranging shifts, walking instead of busing, cutting every corner available to buy the time. The facility was better than she expected. Clean rooms, staff who checked in regularly, actual meals on actual plates. Harold had a bed with real sheets and a window that looked out onto a courtyard with a single oak tree. He was eating regularly, gaining weight, his mind sharpening day by day. On a visit in early July, she found him sitting up in bed writing in a small notebook. Leather-bound, pocket-sized, the pages dense with tight handwriting. "What is that?" Mariana asked, setting down a bag of cookies Rosa had sent. "My memory is going," Harold said simply. "I am writing down what matters. Things that are true." He held the notebook out to her. "I want you to have this." "Harold, take it, please." She took it, flipped through the pages. Names she did not recognize. Strings of numbers. Dates. Locations. Some entries were clear and methodical. Others were frantic, written in a hand that was losing its steadiness. "What is all this?" "If anyone ever asks," Harold said, "you will know what happened." She slipped the notebook into her bag next to the envelope. 2 pieces of something she could not yet see the shape of. Her life was shifting, slowly. The grand view had restored her hours after 2 housekeepers quit. Rosa had put in a word with management. The Dollar Depot had given her a tiny raise, 15 cents an hour, barely noticeable, but symbolically enormous. She had caught up on rent. The electric company had agreed to a payment plan. She bought Harold something with part of her first full paycheck in months. A wool blanket, deep green, thick and soft, a blanket she wished she could afford for herself. She brought it on her next visit. Harold unfolded it across his lap and sat there staring at it. His eyes filled. "No one has done anything like this for me in 20 years, he said. "Well, someone should have," Mariana said. He held her hand, and they sat in silence. Some things did not need words. Harold died on a Wednesday in late August. The facility called Mariana at 6:05 in the morning. She was standing in her kitchen heating water for broth out of habit, even though there was no one to bring it to. Her phone rang. "Miss Reyes, this is Pine Ridge VA Care. I am calling about Harold Birch." Her hand froze on the stove dial. "He passed peacefully in his sleep last night. Heart failure. I am very sorry." The words reached her ears but did not land. They floated in the air of her tiny kitchen like smoke, shapeless and impossible. "Miss Reyes?" "I am here," she heard herself say. Her voice sounded like it belonged to someone standing very far away. "We will need you to come in for his personal effects. There is not much, and we need to discuss arrangements. I will be there in an hour." She hung up and stood perfectly still. The pot of water on the hot plate began to steam. Harold was gone. The man who had called her iron. The man who had split crackers with her when she was hungry. The man who had looked at her every morning like what she did mattered, like she mattered, even when the rest of the world told her she did not. Mariana turned off the stove and sat down on the floor with her back against the wall. She did not cry. The grief was too large for tears. It filled her chest like concrete, heavy and permanent, and setting fast. She called in sick to both jobs. Took 2 buses to Dearborn. They gave her a bag. The green blanket, folded carefully. 3 shirts. A pair of shoes with the soles worn through. The notebook. And at the bottom, a sealed envelope with her name on it in Harold's trembling handwriting. She opened it in the hallway. Inside was a photograph. Harold, decades younger, standing in a laboratory next to equipment she could not identify. He wore a white coat and a security badge with his photo and a string of numbers. Behind him, a man in a military uniform and another in a suit. The man in the suit she recognized from a documentary she had seen. A former Secretary of Defense. She turned the photograph over. 3 words on the back, written in Harold's hand. Remember the girl. Mariana's hands shook. She went home, sat on the mattress, pulled out the other envelope, the one Harold had given her months ago, the one she had promised to mail. She opened it. Inside was a letter, handwritten on lined paper, and another copy of the photograph. The letter read, "To whoever reads this. Likely Dr. Catherine Hargrove, if this address still works. If you are reading this, I am gone. I do not have much to leave behind. No family, no money, no legacy that the world would recognize. But I want you to know about someone who mattered to me. Her name is Mariana Reyes. For 7 months, she brought me soup every single morning. Not because she had to. Not because anyone was watching or keeping score. She did it because she saw me when everyone else looked through me. I spent 31 years building systems that kept this country safe. Satellite defense arrays. Early warning networks. Projects that still do not have names you are allowed to say out loud. When I retired, the system that I built was supposed to take care of me. Instead, it lost me. Misfiled my clearance records, buried my benefits in a database no one maintained, and forgot I existed. I spent 8 years on the street. And in all that time, one person stopped. One person sat down on a frozen bench in Detroit and handed me a thermos of soup and asked if I wanted crackers. She was 24 years old, working 2 jobs, barely feeding herself. And she fed me every single morning for 7 months. This country took everything I gave and then lost me in the filing system. But this girl, this struggling, exhausted, extraordinary girl, she gave me dignity when I had nothing left. She deserves better than what this country gave me. Remember her the way she remembered me. Harold Birch, GS-15, retired. Mariana read the letter 4 times. Each time the words carved deeper. She looked at the address. Dr. Catherine Hargrove, Department of Defense, Office of Personnel Accountability. Harold had not been confused. Had not been building fantasies to survive the cold. He had been telling the truth. Every word. Every satellite. Every underground laboratory. All of it. The next morning Mariana went to the post office. She waited in line for 25 minutes, the envelope in her hand, turning it over and over. When she reached the counter, she almost did not mail it. Almost put it back in her bag and went on with her life. But she had made a promise to a man who had nothing left except his word and hers. "I need to send this," she said. The postal clerk waited. $6.10. Mariana paid with crumpled bills and loose change counted out on the counter. She watched the clerk stamp it and drop it into a bin with hundreds of other envelopes. It disappeared into the pile. Walking out of the post office, Mariana felt hollowed out. Nobody was going to read that letter. Nobody was going to care about one forgotten engineer who had died on a VA bed in Dearborn. His letter would end up in a filing cabinet somewhere, and that would be the end of Harold Birch. She went to his memorial service that Friday. It was held at the VA facility. Just Mariana, a chaplain, and one aide who had worked Harold's wing. No family, no honor guard, no flag. The chaplain said kind, general things about service and sacrifice. Mariana stared at the floor and tried to remember the sound of Harold's voice saying "You have iron in you." When the service ended, the chaplain shook her hand and said he was sorry for her loss. The aide, a young man named David who had helped Harold with his meals, stopped her on the way out. "He talked about you all the time," David said. "Every morning when I brought his breakfast, he would say, 'My friend Mariana makes better soup than this.'" He said it like a joke, but you could tell it was the most important thing in his world. Mariana pressed her lips together and nodded. She could not trust herself to speak. She walked from the facility to the nearest bus stop, a 15-minute walk through a neighborhood of small brick houses and chain-link fences and yards where children's toys sat forgotten in patches of brown grass. The normalcy of it hurt. Harold was gone, and the world had not paused for even a second. That afternoon, she went to the bus stop on Verner Highway, where she had met Harold 8 months earlier. Someone else was sleeping on the bench now. A younger man, maybe 30, with a cardboard sign propped against the armrest that read, "Anything helps, God bless." Mariana stood there for a long time, looking at the spot where Harold used to sit. Then she walked home. 2.5 weeks later, the knock came. 6:15 in the morning. 3 people in dark suits. A manila folder with a Department of Defense seal. And a question Mariana had never imagined hearing. "General Hargrove would like to meet you," the woman said. Mariana's voice was barely a whisper. "General?" Dr. Catherine Hargrove was promoted to Brigadier General last year. She is now Director of Personnel Accountability. She received Mr. Birch's letter. The woman paused. She wants to meet the woman who remembered him. Mariana had never been on a plane. They arranged everything. A flight from Detroit Metro to Reagan National. A government car at the terminal. A hotel in Crystal City, small but clean, with a bed that had a headboard and sheets that smelled like something other than mildew. That night Mariana could not sleep. She lay in the hotel bed, which was the softest mattress she had ever felt, and stared at the ceiling. She thought about Harold. About the sealed envelope she had almost not mailed. About the photograph of a young man in a white lab coat who she would never have recognized as the frail figure on the bench if someone had shown it to her a year ago. She got up at 2 in the morning and sat in the desk chair by the window, looking out at the lights of Arlington, the traffic on the highway, the distant glow of the monuments across the river. Everything felt enormous and strange and misplaced, like she had been picked up from her real life and set down in someone else's by mistake. She showered at 4:30, dressed at 5, sat on the edge of the bed until the phone rang at 7 with a wake-up call she had not requested. By 8:30, a driver was taking her to the Pentagon. Security took 30 minutes. Metal detectors, badge photos, a visitor pass clipped to the blazer Rosa had lent her. The blazer smelled faintly of Rosa's perfume, and Mariana held on to that smell like a lifeline as she walked through corridors so polished she could see her reflection in the floor. They stopped outside an office on the U-ring. The escort knocked twice. "Come in." The office was functional and precise. A desk, shelves lined with binders, flags in the corner. Behind the desk sat a woman in her early 60s with short silver hair and the kind of posture that suggested she had been sitting at attention since she was 18. Brigadier General Catherine Hargrove stood when Mariana entered and extended her hand. "Miss Reyes, thank you for making the trip." Mariana shook her hand. The general's grip was firm and deliberate. "Please sit." Mariana sat. Hargrove returned to her chair and opened a file. Harold's name was on the tab. "I received Harold's letter 3 weeks ago," Hargrove said. "It was the first confirmation we had in 12 years that he was still alive." She paused, "and that he had died." Mariana's throat tightened. "I did not know what else to do with it." "You did exactly the right thing." Hargrove leaned forward. "Harold Birch was one of the most important classified engineers this country has ever employed. He designed satellite guidance systems that are still operational today. He built early warning networks during the Cold War, then upgraded them through Kosovo, through the Gulf, through operations that do not appear in any public record." She tapped the file. "When he retired in 1999, he should have received full benefits, full pension, full medical support. Instead, his clearance records were misfiled during a database migration in 2001. His entire personnel file was essentially erased." "How does that happen?" Mariana asked. "The same way it always happens." Hargrove's voice carried an edge of controlled anger. "Budget cuts to records management. Outdated systems. An assumption that someone else would catch the error. By the time anyone noticed, Harold had been off the grid for 3 years. The VA had no record of him. He was a ghost. He told me stories," Mariana said quietly. "About laboratories, about satellites. I thought he was confused." "He was not confused." Hargrove pulled out the photograph. "This was taken in 1996 at a facility I cannot name. That is Deputy Secretary Thornton on the right. Harold had just completed a system upgrade that prevented, and I am choosing my words carefully here, a significant geopolitical miscalculation." She looked at Mariana. "He saved people who will never know his name. And then we forgot him." Mariana sat with that weight. "I am conducting a full audit," Hargrove continued. "Personnel accountability review covering every classified employee who separated from service between 1990 and 2005. Harold's case is the worst we have found, but there are others. 53 confirmed so far. Possibly more. Why are you telling me this? Because Harold's letter was not about himself. Hargrove closed the file. It was about you. She met Mariana's eyes. He wanted me to remember what you did. And I want to honor that. I just brought him soup. Exactly. Hargrove's voice softened. You saw a person that an entire system had erased. You gave him dignity with a thermos and a sleeve of crackers when the most powerful government on earth gave him nothing. That matters, Miss Reyes. More than you know. I want to establish a memorial fund in Harold's name, Hargrove said. Reform the tracking systems. Ensure this never happens again. And I want you to testify before the Senate Homeland Security Subcommittee about what happened. Mariana's stomach dropped. Testify. Tell them what you told me. What Harold's life looked like from the ground. Hargrove leaned back. I can push change from inside the system. But Congress needs to hear from someone who saw the failure with her own eyes. Someone who lived it. I am a hotel housekeeper, Mariana said. Why would they listen to me? Hargrove's expression shifted. Became something fierce and certain. Title measures position, she said. Character measures worth. She let the silence hold. They will listen because you are the only person in this entire story who did the right thing. Not for a promotion. Not for recognition. Because it needed doing. Will you do it? Mariana thought about Harold. About the frost on his collar. About the way he held that first thermos of soup like it was something sacred. She took a shaky breath. Yes. 3 weeks of preparation. Attorneys, communications officers, policy staff. They set her up in a small temporary office at a Pentagon annex and walked her through the mechanics of a congressional hearing. The witness table. The microphones. The cameras. The way senators would ask questions that were not really questions, but statements designed to make themselves look good on camera. You will want to react, one attorney told her. Do not. Stay calm. Stick to what happened. Your story is powerful enough without emotion hijacking it. Mariana thought about that word. Hijacking. As if her emotions were a threat rather than the entire point. They ran practice sessions. Mock questions from mock senators, played by staffers who were surprisingly good at being condescending. One of them, a young man in his 20s, asked her the same question 7 different ways, trying to get her to say something that sounded partisan. After the 4th attempt, Mariana said quietly, I did not bring soup to Harold because of politics. I brought it because he was cold. The room went silent for 3 seconds. Then the lead attorney smiled. That stays in. One advisor, a young communications specialist, suggested softening her story. Maybe we should not emphasize the 2 jobs, the poverty angle. It could read as political. Mariana looked at Hargrove, who was sitting quietly in the corner. Hargrove set down her coffee. If we erase who she is, we erase why Harold's letter mattered. She looked at her team. She tells her truth. All of it. Otherwise, this is performance. Yes, ma'am. The hearing was October 14th. Mariana flew back to D.C. the night before. Could not sleep. Read her testimony until the words lost meaning. Rosa called her at 10 that night. Are you nervous? I am terrified. Good, Rosa said. Means you care. Just tell them what happened. The morning of the hearing, Mariana put on the suit Hargrove's team had bought her. Navy blue. Professional. It fit perfectly and felt like it belonged to someone else. She stared in the hotel mirror and barely recognized herself. The committee room was enormous. Tiered seating rising like an amphitheater. Cameras in the back. Press filling the benches. Senators filtering in, talking to aides, not looking at her. Mariana sat at the witness table. Her hands trembled. She pressed them flat against the wood. Hargrove testified first. Laid out the scope of the failure. 53 confirmed cases. An unknown number still missing. Systems designed for the Cold War, still managing records of people who had served in the modern era. Then it was Mariana's turn. She walked to the table, sat down, adjusted the microphone. A senator from Massachusetts spoke first. Miss Reyes, can you tell us about your relationship with Harold Birch? Mariana looked at her written testimony. Then she pushed the pages aside. I met Harold in January, she said. He slept on a bench near my bus stop. I started bringing him soup. A thermos of broth, some crackers, sometimes an orange. Her voice steadied. I did not know he was a government scientist. He told me stories about satellites and laboratories, but I thought he was confused. Maybe sick. She paused. But I brought him soup anyway. Because it did not matter if the stories were true. He was still a person. A senator from Texas, older, skeptical, leaned into his microphone. Miss Reyes, we appreciate the sentiment. But we are here to discuss policy. Federal budgets are constrained. What exactly are you proposing? The room went quiet. Mariana looked at him, felt something shift inside her. Fear turning into clarity. I am not proposing a budget line, she said. I am telling you about a man named Harold Birch who built the satellite systems that kept you safe for 31 years. A man who this government promised to take care of. A man who ended up sleeping on a bench in Detroit because someone misfiled his paperwork. Her voice did not waver. I kept my promise to Harold with a thermos of soup. I could not afford that soup. I skipped meals to make it. I walked to work in the cold to save bus fare, so I could buy crackers for a man the United States government forgot. She leaned forward slightly. I am a hotel housekeeper making $12 an hour. And I kept my promise. The question is whether you will keep yours. The room was completely silent. The senator from Texas opened his mouth, closed it. Reporters in the back rows were writing furiously. Mariana continued. If we only care about people after we find out they were important, after we learn they had classified clearances and built defense systems, then we have already failed. Harold was worth remembering before I knew any of that. He was worth remembering when he was just an old man on a bench. She looked around the room. He deserved better. They all deserved better. General Hargrove stood. Mr. Chairman, effective immediately, the Office of Personnel Accountability is establishing a dedicated task force for classified service employees lost in the system. We are allocating $4.5 million to the Harold Birch Memorial Fund for emergency support and case management. She looked at Mariana. And I am appointing Miss Reyes as Community Outreach Director. She understands what accountability looks like from the ground. Mariana's eyes widened. The hearing continued for another hour. Budget questions. Implementation timelines. Oversight structures. Senators who had been skeptical at the beginning asked increasingly specific questions about the database failures, about the audit methodology, about the number of classified employees who might have fallen through the same gap. Mariana sat at the witness table and watched the machinery of government respond, slowly and imperfectly, to a problem that had existed for decades, and that might never have surfaced if Harold Birch had not given a sealed envelope to a hotel housekeeper in Detroit. She barely heard any of it. The weight of what had happened was settling into her bones, not triumph, but something heavier and more permanent. Responsibility. Afterward, reporters swarmed her in the hallway. Cameras, microphones, questions from every direction. One reporter's voice cut through the rest. How does it feel to be famous? Mariana stopped and turned. I do not want to be famous, she said. I want Harold to be remembered. That clip played on every news channel that night. 8 months later, Mariana still took the same bus. Still woke up at 5:30. Still heated water on her stove every morning out of a habit that had become something closer to ritual. But the rest of her life had changed. She worked at the VA hospital in Dearborn 3 days a week as a certified nursing assistant, having finally completed her program. The other 2 days she spent managing the Harold Birch Memorial Fund, which had grown to $7.2 million, 5 from the DoD, 2.2 from private donations after her testimony spread online. They had funded 14 organizations in the first round. Veteran housing programs. Mental health counseling centers. A legal aid clinic helping former service members navigate benefits bureaucracy. A records recovery initiative to digitize and cross-reference classified personnel files. Mariana sat in a small office at the VA hospital reviewing second-round grant applications. 51 requests. She could not fund them all, but she would fund as many as possible. One afternoon, making her rounds, she noticed a young woman sitting alone in the waiting area. Early 20s. Brown hair. Wearing an oversized army jacket and boots that had seen real use. She was staring at the floor, arms wrapped around herself. Mariana grabbed 2 cups of coffee from the break room and sat down beside her. Do you take it black or with hope? The woman looked up, startled. Then she almost smiled. Sugar. Mariana handed her the cup. I am Mariana. I work here. Jess. I am trying to get my benefits processed. They keep sending me to different offices, different forms. What branch? Army. Combat medic. Discharged 9 months ago. Mariana saw Harold in the way Jess held herself. Rigid. Careful. Trying to maintain dignity while a system ground her down. Come with me, Mariana said. She brought Jess to her office, pulled out Harold's notebook, the one filled with names and numbers and processes that she had spent months decoding and organizing into a resource guide. We are going to fix this, Mariana said. Right now? Jess's eyes filled. Why are you helping me? Because someone taught me, Mariana said, that small things are not small. A year after Harold's death, Mariana stood at Arlington National Cemetery. Harold had been reinterred there with full honors after Hargrove's investigation confirmed the scope of his service. His headstone read Harold Allen Birch, Senior Engineer, United States Department of Defense, 1955 to 2025. She knelt and placed a thermos of soup on the stone. Chicken broth. Same as always. I kept my promise, she whispered. The October wind moved through the trees. She stayed for a long time. On the bus back to her hotel, she looked out the window at the monuments and marble buildings that had terrified her the first time she saw them. They did not terrify her anymore. They reminded her of Harold. Built to last. Built to protect. And sometimes, forgotten by the very people they were built for. Back in Detroit, Mariana stood at the bus stop on Verner Highway on a Tuesday morning. Beside her stood a teenage girl, 16, part of a mentorship program the fund had started for young women in underserved neighborhoods. Mariana handed her a paper bag. The girl peeked inside. A sandwich. An apple. A bottle of water. Someone taught me, Mariana said quietly, that the smallest things carry the most weight. The girl nodded. She did not fully understand yet. But she would. The bus pulled up. They climbed aboard together. As the bus rolled past the bench outside the shuttered warehouse, Mariana looked through the window. For one breath, she could have sworn she saw him there. White hair, green jacket, pale blue eyes, sitting on that rusted bench with his hands wrapped around an invisible thermos. He was smiling. Then the bus turned the corner, and he was gone. But what he taught her stayed. Kindness does not require an audience. Dignity does not require permission. And the people this world forgets are often the ones who built it. The Harold Birch Memorial Fund has served over 2,300 classified service veterans and defense employees in its first year. Mariana Reyes continues to work as a VA nursing assistant and fund director. In 2026, Congress passed the Birch Accountability Act, requiring the Department of Defense to establish comprehensive tracking protocols for personnel with classified service records and mandating annual audits of benefits eligibility for separated employees. What small act of kindness will you choose today? Someone near you is waiting to be seen. Tell us in the comments. And if this story moved you, please hit that like button, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your support helps us tell more stories that matter. Thank you for being here.